Going to get started. Okay, so this is Patrick Coffey. He's a developer at 4 Kitchens, like I mentioned, and he's going to be presenting tonight on an introduction to MeteorJS. Pretty cool stuff, and I think, if I did this right, this should be available on YouTube as well. He'll present, and then we'll have question and answers at the end, I think. And if you want to, I guess you have any questions during it, you could try tweeting him at some Patrick O. It was on the Hill Country JS. His name was on there. So with that, I will hand it over to you, and I'm going to press mute.
Awesome. Well, hey everybody. Like Kevin said, I am Patrick, and I'm going to show you my screen so that I can show you some slides that I made. Let's see. Okay. I'm going to assume that you can see my screen because I can't hear you, and I'm going to get started. Cool. So, hi everybody. I am Patrick Coffey. I'm an engineer at 4 Kitchens, like Kevin mentioned, and I am on the interwebs at Patrico Coffey-O on most of the places, Twitter and GitHub. Those are the main ones. So today I'm going to present some information about getting started with Meteor. Meteor is a framework that is relatively new. It's a JavaScript framework that encompasses a lot of cool functionality that helps you build applications in JavaScript really quickly and really efficiently. I've been working with Meteor for a couple of years now, and I've really enjoyed my time with it. So let's get started. What is Meteor? Meteor is a JavaScript framework that enables developers to quickly create reactive, highly accessible web applications. This is kind of a generic description, and I'm going to go through some core parts of Meteor, some of the API, and show you kind of how that works from a conceptual perspective, and then I'm going to give you some code examples to show you how it works from an implementation perspective. So Meteor is a framework that stands between your server and your client and facilitates the organized transfer of data between the two. That sentence kind of encompasses everything that Meteor does. One of the core parts of Meteor is the collection API, which abstracts the concept of collections and documents from the perspective of a single database like Mongo or Redis or MySQL into an API that you could use to talk to those that isn't really necessarily related specifically to any of them. So like I said, it's not specific to any database. It's also isomorphic, so you can create a query that queries a database for some data, and you can run that same query on the client and the server, which means you could create a query on the server and paste it into the client and it would run, and you can also take a file and write it in a generic way and publish it to both the client and the server and have libraries and those sorts of things available to both and only have one code file for that. It's also easily extendable. There are some really comprehensive schema systems available for this collection API that allow you to define explicitly what types of objects can and should be inserted and how those objects should be pulled out of the database as well. The other side of this is a reactive templating system, which allows you to basically take data from that collection API and render it so that the user can interact with it. It allows you to easily create templates that use documents from a subscription, which I'll talk about in a minute. And when documents are inserted and updated and removed, the templating system reacts as expected. So if you, in your collection, delete a document that's within that collection, then the templating system will automatically recalculate itself without you having to do anything from the code perspective or from the user perspective, meaning you don't have to refresh the page, and as a developer you don't have to say, okay, delete this piece of DOM and recalculate it and reinsert it. It does that for you. Meteor also has a publish and subscribe API, which kind of connects the templating system and the collection API. The publish API is something that the server uses to define document publications. And what that basically means is that it takes context as parameters, and then it queries the database for documents that fit those parameters, and then it returns that query. And the client subscribes to that publication. So the publication sends that data over a socket to the client as soon as the client requests it and gives it the context it needs, and the client uses those documents. And as I mentioned with the templating system, publications and subscriptions are reactive. So documents added to the collection of documents that belong to that publication on either the client or the server are synced. And that's really cool because it means that if you have multiple clients that are subscribed to the same publication, as soon as you change a document within that publication on either client, it's synced to the server, and then on any other clients, it's synced back to those clients. So it's reactive and it's responsive across multiple client instances. Meteor also contains a permission system, which is really simple to use, but it's really important because it defines who can effectively who can insert and update and remove documents, which is really important because you don't want everybody to be able to do everything on all documents. Meteor also contains a package system, and that package system is really well baked. It's got a lot of mature packages that are available on atmospherejs.com. There are packages to do almost anything, like install front-end frameworks. Like I mentioned earlier, there are packages for the collection API that can help you define schemas. There are packages that build forms from those schemas, and most of them are really well baked, and they've been around a while too, throughout all the beta versions of Meteor. And packages are structurally kind of like miniature Meteor applications, and they have a lot of the same tools that your Meteor app would. So when you create a package, you could theoretically take code and files right from your Meteor application and throw them into that package, and then install that package, and it would behave just the same, which makes it really easy to make those packages. They're really easy to install, and they're really easy to maintain. The versioning system is very good. It's very tight, and it's it's a pleasure to work with. And Meteor also has a build system. The builds are really easy to make and transport. You basically just give Meteor one command, and it will give you a gzip file. It basically takes all the files that you've been working with, compiles any files that need to be compiled, minifies them, does a bunch of fancy stuff, throws them in a gzip file, and so that you can throw it onto a server. The build system is also really configurable. You can write source handlers for different file types really easily. So if you had, to give an example, if you want to use CoffeeScript within Meteor, you can write a source handler for the build system that would sort of automatically, if you will, as soon as Meteor creates a build, compile the CoffeeScript into JavaScript and use that JavaScript. And that's very simple to do. And builds can also be made for different environments, Cordova being a primary example, like PhoneGap. So you could say, okay, this Meteor application is supposed to support desktop browsers and phones, and then let's just give another example, like Roku's. Let's say you're writing an app for Roku. You could write a build version for the Roku and for PhoneGap and for the desktop browser, and you could use one command to build each one of those for those specific environments with files organized and code deployed to each collection of code just for that environment. And right now, built into Meteor Core, it supports Cordova, the PhoneGap stuff, and the desktop browser, although more environments are going to be supported soon. The build system is under a really active development. Lots of things like file scanning APIs are coming up. So as soon as that comes out, I think it's being rolled out in the next release actually, you'll be able to say, okay, as soon as this type of file is compiled, I want to scan it to make sure that it fits my coding standards, or I want to minimize it, or do something like that. And so that's a new feature, and there are lots of other things that are being developed as well. So it's time for some code examples. I wrote a quick little application that should kind of clarify these concepts and show you what they look like in action, and maybe help you understand how Meteor works from an implementation perspective. So I'm going to go ahead and show you this repository. I created this repository. It's kind of a fork of this boilerplate that I run that has a bunch of packages that you probably want to use, and some file structure and all of that to help you organize your application, and some documentation. So this is just an instance of that, and that's what I'm going to show you here. Right, so here is the running version of my application. And it is running right here. This is the Meteor console. And I just started it up a few minutes ago, as you can see. It's watching changes, and it's deployed. And this is my file system. I'm going to make this text just a little bit bigger so you can see it. And here we go. So keep Meteor's files in source. All right. So this is Meteor's root. As you can see, it contains the .meteor directory, and that .meteor directory, contains all of the files that Meteor needs to do the things that it does. The build system environments, the packages, releases, versions of packages, and all of that stuff. And it's all wrapped into that .dot file so that you don't really see it when you open it up in a Finder instance, or whatever operating system you're using. That Explorer tool won't render it, and all you see is your code, which, as you can see, is in my application in client, lib, public, and server. Now, to give it a little bit of explanation of why this is this way, Meteor. Let me increase my terminal font size for you. Hopefully that works. So Meteor has a couple different folders that are respected, if you will, within the Meteor build system. So it has a client folder, a public folder, a server folder, and a lib folder, and there's another folder that's available. It's called private, that isn't listed here because I don't really have any private files within this application, but that's a whole different thing. So these two folders, client and public, client and server, are environment-specific folders. They contain code that should only be published to either the client or the server. The lib folder contains code that should be published to both. And really, in Meteor, anything outside of either one of these folders gets published to both the client and the server. And so let's go ahead and take a look. Actually, I'm going to show you what this application does first. So let me just do this really quickly. So this is the application. I'm going to blow it up just a little bit just so you can see it a little bit better on the screen. Hopefully it's okay. Oops. And this is a pizza ordering website that I put together really quickly. It's a little app that lets you order a pizza. It's not very, wouldn't work in real life for a lot of reasons, but it is good for a demo. So I'm going to log in. I put together a quick user system under my kitchen's email address, and now I'm logged in, and I have no orders. So I'm going to go ahead and create an order, and this order is going to be delivered to For Kitchens HQ, and I'm going to order this pizza, the Spoderman pizza, and there we go. I created my order. So really simple, right? So let's look at the code that that facilitates this. So first off, in the server, we have a order directory that contains a file that helps Meteor understand what to do with orders. So actually, let me show you first the collection. So here is a file that is published to both the server and the client. And this file defines a collection called orders. And this collection is a Mongo collection, as you can see here. And it when this collection object is operated on, like you call insert or update or remove on it, it will insert, update, or remove objects in the Mongo database accordingly. And so here I've defined a schema for the orders object, and there should be a user, an address, a pizza, and a state, which I haven't really played with a bunch, but its automatic value is ordered. And there's a helper that does something fancy. It just goes to the pizzas object, it finds a pizza for the ID given, and then it returns the title for that pizza. And I'll show you a little bit later. how that works. But so when I go into this server file, I have a startup function, and this is the orders object that was created over here in this file. And this is the permission system that I was talking about. It's an allow function that that basically defines who can and cannot do different things on this orders collection. And it's really simple. If a user exists, then they can insert an order. If not, then they cannot. And if they're updating an order, then the order user has to be the same as the order ID. Same for I'm sorry, the user ID. And this is where I really wanted to show you this function right here. This is our publication function. So this takes a user ID and it gets documents from Mongo using this simple query find function where user is this user ID. And it returns those orders for that given ID. And on the client side, you're going to see where I subscribe to this publication, and it gives me data that I want. So I'm going to go ahead and open the client version of this, modules, orders.js. Cool. So I've created a route called, let's do this, called order. And I have made a subscription, and this router waits on these subscriptions. So these subscriptions will return true when the connection has been made and the client has the data. So this is an array, and until all values within that array are true, this function will not return, and the router will just still be waiting. So as you can see, I have subscribed to this publication that I just showed you in the server file. And I didn't really have to pass it anything because it uses this user ID, which is also which is always the ID of the current user. I also subscribe to all the pizzas. I'll show you this publication function. There's not very many pizzas, so I'm okay with just giving all the pizzas to the client. And then the action for this router is that it's going to render the orders template, and it's going to pass it an object of data, and that object of data is going to be orders. And as you can see, now that I have subscribed to that publication and I have order objects on my client, I can query for those order objects. And so I go ahead and I get all the order objects for the current user ID, and I fetch those objects. And cool, so I'm going to show you the template now. Client modules order orders.html. Cool, so this is the template orders. As you can see, I said render orders. This is the one that we're rendering. And if there are orders to render, then we go through each order and we output that order in an li DOM element, and we create a delete button, and we throw the pizza name in there, which, by the way, is why I mentioned this helper function, because pizza name is defined by this, and it does that calculation, right? We print the state, and then we print the address of the order so the user knows where it's going, and that's the end of that. And if there is no order, then we just say, hi, you have no orders, would you like to create one? And then we put in a order create button, right? And that's what you're seeing right here, effectively. That's pretty cool. So there's not really any code outside of this simple query and the publication subscription functions that really deal with any of the rendering or any of that. And to give you an example, I created this delete button right here, and it has an ID. And over in this template JavaScript file, I have said on click remove this this order, right? I just went to the collection API and I've said for this order object, remove this order of this ID, right? So if I click that, this is going to disappear. It's going to re-render this template, right? So that all makes sense. And I really didn't have to do anything like remove that DOM object or re-render this template or anything like that. All I had to do was tell Meteor that I was deleting that object, and it knew that it needed to rerun this portion of the template, and it knew that it didn't have orders and that it needed to render this instead of this, right? So that's one of the really cool things about Meteor. You don't have to do a whole bunch of DOM work. It does it for you, and that makes your code base a lot more clean. The other cool thing that you might want to see in action here that I'm going to show you is open this up again in another browser window side by side. Hopefully you can see those. So I have this this window open twice. And I'm going to go and I'm going to create an order. And you're going to see how this sort of works. So again, for kitchens HQ, and this time I want Daffy the Duck pizza. Now, as soon as I created that, you saw that this browser instance didn't have to reload or anything. It just rendered that, and that's again due to the publish subscription API. As soon as this subscription changed and this publication changed, and the documents returned by this publication changed, Meteor knew that it needed to again recalculate this block of code and re-render that. And if I were to do this again and order another pizza, you would see the same thing happening, and the same thing happens for the delete action. So I can delete it on one and delete it on both, and that sort of thing. And that's really cool. You could do a lot of cool things with that because Meteor just handles it, and it makes your code base really simple, really clean, and it makes it really easy to build these reactive applications. Cool. So I have some slides that talk about why I like working with Meteor, and then talk about some of the difficult parts of working with Meteor. But I was going to see if you guys had any questions first or wanted to see anything else. And so, Kevin, do you think you could open it up for questions?
Do you have questions? I'll repeat them. Any questions so far? Do you have any good resources to start with Meteor?
I do. So this is a Meteor boilerplate that I run. You can find it by going to my GitHub account. It should be listed in this little widget here under Meteor boilerplate. And there are several other Meteor boilerplates available. You can just Google Meteor boilerplate and it'll come up with that. But this sort of gives you some example files that set up this sort of publish and subscribe functions and even a simple router and stuff like I was showing you here. I think it's called example. So if you go to this file, you can see example.js. Yes, so it creates a publish function, an allow function for the examples collection. It defines the examples collection. So you can basically take this, download it, and if you have Meteor installed, which you can easily do by running a simple command that you can find on the Meteor website, you can just run the Meteor command within the source directory, and it will launch it for you. I think all of this is documented. And there's even coding standards stuff with this to help you develop things and a number of other fancy things. I think there's like a Docker file in there. Yeah. So this might help you get started. I'd encourage you to explore it. And I'll also encourage you to explore, which I talked about a little bit later on the slides, docs.meteor.com. This will show you a little bit about how Meteor works. It's a quick start guide that gives you the command to install it and then create a project, and this is kind of like a bare bones installation. And then there are also some tutorials and example applications that they have here. This is a great resource. I think I'm looking at the full API. There's a basic API that gets you started really quickly. It's really simple and kind of takes out a lot of the complicated stuff if you're just getting started. Anything else?
There's another book called Discovering Meteor, I think.
Yeah.
That's I've heard good things about it. I've never read it. And Patrick, you have a couple blog posts as well that you've written about.
Yeah, I have some blog posts. You can go to forward.forkitchens.com, and there are a couple in this Meteor series that I've been doing. There's a getting started post that sort of documents the process of installing Meteor on different environments and creating an app and explains the server and the client and collections and how you can work with that and publish and subscribe functions and all that. So you can take a look at this, or Discover Meteor is a great book. I have an account here. It's pretty decent as well.
Okay, another question?
So you mentioned that it's remote, right?
Yes.
I mean, so that means that it sends the full HTML document down for
Patrick, can you confirm that it sends a full HTML document down on the first page load, and then I'm pretty sure it does, but can you confirm that?
Yeah, so actually it does not. What happens is it sends the templates down to the client, and the client then renders those templates. You can use a server-side route in a package called Iron Router, which is what I was showing you here today. Like I said, there are server-side routes, and you can define those, and those will send HTML from the server. But by default, it loads some JavaScript and loads some templates, and then it renders those templates. It does not send fully rendered templates from the start. I actually am writing a blog post right now about performance in Meteor and how to make sure that this is okay. The concept of completely rendering on the client, how to maybe mix rendering on the client and rendering on the server, and some things you can do to make sure that if you are rendering on the client, it is performant and always is responsive and quick and performs well.
There we go.
The one more question is, I noticed that there's no there's no CommonJS modules. Is that an option, or is it like does Meteor have its own standard?
Did you hear that, Patrick?
I did not. Can you repeat the question?
He was basically asking that he didn't notice a module system like CommonJS or RequiredJS. Does Meteor have something like that?
CommonJS or RequiredJS. So that would allow you to require NPM modules. Yeah, you can absolutely require NPM modules.
More just in general, like for the scripts, being able to, I guess, require scripts after.
So the idea of using module systems to know your.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. Meteor does not ship with that, but there's absolutely no reason that you could not implement that within your code base. Meteor wouldn't get in the way of that. And you could define a load order. I know that there's a documented way to do that within Meteor if that's what you're looking to do. And you can load different resources at different times using one of those libraries. That shouldn't be a problem.
Awesome. Do you have a question over here? Someone? Sure.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Authentication.
Okay. Question is, can you use something like Passport.js to do your authentication?
Again, I don't think that there will be any issue with that explicitly. Meteor does come with the core comes with a user system which would apply to both like API authentication and from the client side perspective authentication, and there might need to be some integration between a library like that and Meteor, meaning if you authenticate with that, it would extend that authentication to Meteor, but it shouldn't be a problem. Yeah, you could definitely do something like that. In fact, there may already be an implementation of that. You can go to atmosphere.js.com, and there is a lot of packages available. A lot of these popular libraries that you were talking about are already extended to Meteor here. They don't really belong in Meteor Core, but there are some really great packages that will bring those to Meteor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the question is, if you're on two separate devices, would the synchronization still work?
Absolutely. Yes. So to give you an example, one of the Meteor applications that I wrote back when Meteor is in release 0.8, I think, something like that, was an application that helped a sod farmer manage his sod and trucks and deliveries. So he had an instance of the application running in his office, and then his people out in the field had iPads that had like 3G connections or something like that. And as soon as he got an order in from, I think it was a Drupal website, that order would pop into his Meteor application. He would confirm that the order was okay, make sure that it was going to be scheduled on time, and make sure that it was legitimate and everything. And then he would simply just drag it over. There's like a GUI for him to drag it over into a ship box, and the people in the field just had their iPads open, and they would see that come up on their screen and know. And there's even an algorithm to like calculate the routes for the trucks and how they should unload and load up the sod so that it could come out in the right order and all that. But yes, so they just basically have these screens open. They would interact with the application, and then they would stop interacting, and then there are a lot of devices that were displaying this application simultaneously, and as far as I know, it worked really well for them.
Hey Patrick, what about offline support? Like, how does that work?
I believe there is a package that is supposed to bring offline. I can't type. Offline support to Meteor. Let's see. I'm not sure. I don't know the answer to that question. I remember reading something about that. I've never actually implemented that. I'm sure that you could approach that from a pretty logical perspective and go about it a pretty standard way. Meteor is kind of agnostic. It really just handles the communication between the client and the server and stuff like that. So you can do a lot of things on top of it that it will never really interrupt.
I asked that because for some reason I thought that it was built in.
It actually may be. That's just something that I've never played around with and that I really don't know the answer to.
Questions? Okay, I think that's it for questions right now.
Okay.
Did you want to keep going?
Yeah. I have a couple more slides. So I really like Meteor, and I'm going to talk about why I like it. Some of the things that I've experienced with Meteor, working with it closely for I guess probably 11 or 12 months in the past few years, and some of the hardships that I came across with Meteor. So it's easier to work with. The developer experience is really, really good. As you saw when I was giving you examples in the code, there's just there's a server-side console and there's a client, and and that's really it. And it's really easy to install, and it's kind of a pleasure to work with. Code changers are live, like I was showing you. Like in the interface, when I went to one interface and I changed something, and then it changed to the other interface. Well, that works while you're developing as well. So if you change a template or a piece of JavaScript that affects the client, you don't have to do anything. It will just automatically render. So using transcompiled languages like Sass and CoffeeScript is really, really easy. You have a build step that compiles it and throws it into a file that the browser can understand, and Meteor does all that for you. You don't have to do anything. And the live development the live updates make development a lot faster because you don't have to be reloading your browser all the time, and dual screens become really useful because you can have your console on one screen and your code editor on another, and then you can have your browser rendered somewhere as well. And that's really efficient. The API is really well documented and easy to work with. As you saw, I was pulling up the Meteor documentation as y'all were asking questions. There's a really basic skinned-down version of the documentation that lends itself towards being very helpful for somebody who's just starting to work with Meteor. And then there's an exhaustive documentation version available that encompasses all of Meteor, or at least most of it. Live testing is pretty easy and available. There are multiple efforts to bring testing to Meteor, and it's actually supposed to come to core. I think there's actually a branch on GitHub of the Meteor project that has a testing tool in core. But there's Leica and there's Velocity, and both of those are pretty good testing tools that you can use within Meteor that will give you live reports on how your code is as you change it. And I've used Velocity. Very minimally, but it was pretty cool, and that is very helpful when you want to write stable code. The Meteor community is one of the best parts of Meteor. It's really responsive, kind, helpful, welcoming. and the people there that belong to the Meteor organization are very nice people. There's a lot of local meetups that are facilitated by local Meteor fans, and those leaders of each meetup are usually in communication with the core group, and the core group really supports those meetups a lot. And sometimes they organize. Well, to give you an example, last fall they had a worldwide Meteor Day in which all the meetups came together and had a screencast, and everybody across the world that had a Meteor meetup group was able to interact with each other online. There's a responsive community in Gitter. I'm not sure if you've heard of that before, but it's an IM client that's based off of GitHub repositories, and due to the nature of time zones and the way the sun works, there's usually always somebody there. So I'll go there at 2 o'clock in the morning, and somebody's awake and active and ready to answer questions, and it's really great. The Stack Overflow community is also really good. You can ask a question and get an answer from one of the engineers really quickly. They watch that stuff really well, and you can actually find me in there. I answer questions sometimes. And like I mentioned before, the Meteor engineers are really, really nice people. No question is stupid. If you have a question, ask them. Ping them on Twitter, one of these message clients, IRC, Stack Overflow, and they'll absolutely answer your question. And they really want you to use their framework, and so they're happy to help you do that. And again, I mentioned this before, but Meteor is structurally really agnostic. You can organize your application in the way that suits your needs best. You guys were asking questions about implementing third-party libraries that are pretty cool and would be necessary for building a really large Meteor application. And you can absolutely do that. Meteor won't get in the way of that most of the time, and you should be able to integrate it pretty seamlessly. And yeah, the file system allows source tree structure to be optimized for your application. If you just want to build a quick prototype and you just want to put some files together and get it up and running so you show somebody, or you just want to write, I don't know, an interface for, an Arduino project you're working on, you can do that. You don't have to make it really complicated. You can just hack it together, and it's really useful for that kind of thing. Getting up and running is really easy, even for noobs like me. You can run a curl command, pipe it to shell, and it'll execute, and Meteor will be installed. End of story. And to create an app, you just run Meteor create your app name, and it creates a directory, puts all the stuff you need in it, and you can go into that directory and run the Meteor command in your command line interface. In your command line, and it'll launch Meteor, and you can go to localhost port 3000 by default, and you'll see it there. And you can do really cool stuff really quickly as a result of this. Meteor has really mature build tools. You can build your application to packages, as I mentioned when I was explaining the build system. And the package system, the versioning stuff is really good within packages. You can build sort of function sets that depend upon each other and version those function sets, and then version the dependencies. You can organize your documentation into those packages, which is kind of surprisingly uncommon, but a really good thing to do. Yeah, and so you can have versions of package dependencies, which is really good if you have multiple people working on your project. One person is working on function set A, the other is working on function set B. Function set B implements function set A, and it implements a specific version. You can both build and make progress on those different function sets, and if they're in packages and one of them gets ahead of one another or makes a change that breaks the other, you can simply just make sure that the other package depends on the version that works correctly, and that's really useful. Easy deployment. You can run it in Docker on Heroku. All you really have to do is take that gzip file that's exported in the build step, and put the files in the right place, and tell Node to run a JS file, and there you go. It's done. And so, what are some challenges? What are some things that have been really difficult when I've worked with Meteor? And definitely, hands down, the first one is architecture. Meteor doesn't demand a really specific organization pattern for your files. It has the 4 main files like client and server, etc. But other than that, it really doesn't care. You can put files wherever you want, and you can define a load order for those, but you could really kind of make a mess if you want. Some people, including me, aren't really good at that. Or I'm sorry, they're not really good at like structuring things well, and so I had to spend a lot of time like studying source tree structure and stuff like that to make sure that when I started an application that was going to grow to be really large, that I didn't mess it up from the beginning and create a pattern of organization that wasn't going to work. Because refactoring things is really hard and takes a lot of time. And monolithic JavaScript files are something that's really common in Meteor projects. You'll see if you go to GitHub and you just search for Meteor projects, you'll see a lot of really, really, really big JavaScript files. And there's a conditional within Meteor that allows you to determine whether or not a block of code is running on the client or the server for those files that are outside of those directories, the client and server directories, just in case you need to do that. And people write all of their code in two of those conditionals, his server and his client, and it just becomes this 3,000 line long file, and it's really not that great. It's really hard to navigate the file and work with the application. The other thing that I had a hard time working with was files. So if you're building an application that interacts with files on the local file system in any way, it can be kind of a pain. And a lot of the Meteor apps that are out there are using external file systems like cloud files from Rackspace and S3, and that's great. That's what I've always done, and it works really well. There are libraries that let you do that. But if you wanted to have, some sort of image modification library, something that worked with local files, there's not an API for that. You have to do it yourself, and you have to write it out, and it's kind of difficult to mess with. There are things that are specific to Meteor that are